Hello everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of Gothic Horror Mashups. Welcome to my channel. So in this video we're going to be doing my January wrap-up, and for this month I mainly wanted to focus on really snowy winter reads, so that's mainly what I read. I attempted to start with Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. And I say attempted to because I DNF'd this one pretty quickly. So if you've seen my December wrap-up, you saw that I attempted to read his newest one, which was a Christmas-themed one, which was Everybody This Christmas Has a Secret. And that one didn't go that well, and to be honest, when I attempted to read this one, I had the same exact issues with this one that I did with his Christmas one, where basically the whole breaking the fourth wall thing where he talks to the reader, I don't know, I thought it was kind of cute and fun in the second book, which is what I read first from this author, but for some reason it just didn't work for me in his next two volumes that I tried to read. It just kind of was annoying. It was a little bit like too meta, if you get my drift. He was being too much like, this is how Christmas holidays are supposed to go, and so this is how I'm going to write it, and like just very, I guess it was supposed to be funny, but I don't know, I found it a little bit annoying. And so all of those issues from that Christmas one, I felt the same way about this one. It was still the breaking the fourth wall, and this is how murder mysteries are supposed to go, and this, and like the main character kind of bothered me. Like I didn't connect to him in the slightest, and I just wasn't jiving with the writing style at all, which is unfortunate because this was the first in the series, and usually the first one tends to be the best in the series, but unfortunately for me, I'm just not connecting to it. I want to say maybe it's a timing issue because I did try to read the Christmas one, which didn't work for me, and so maybe I should have waited longer to attempt this one. And I want to say it's a soft DNF and I'll read it some other time, but if I'm being honest, once I kind of had that bad taste in my mouth, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to get back to this one at least anytime soon. So I want to say it's a soft DNF, but to be honest, it probably is just a hard DNF because there's so many other books to get to that I'll probably never make my way back to this one. So yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just wasn't jiving with this book. So then I decided to do a short little novella. It's called Remains by Andrew Cole. And somebody told me that this was a wintry read, so I went ahead and read it. And there's really only like one scene in the entire book that even mentions snow. So if you're looking for a really snowy book to read, this is not going to be it. So that was a bit of a bummer because I was looking for like winter vibes, but I mean, it's not a huge deal, but just wanted to let you know in case you're looking for something snowy and you think, oh, this must be snowy. It's not. So this is another one that didn't quite work for me. I'd probably give this about 2 stars. I don't know. It wasn't for me. This is a grief horror novella about this woman who lost her son in a pretty horrific way. So if that's a trigger for you, children being harmed, then I would probably skip this one because it's pretty heartbreaking what happens to her son. And it tells you in graphic detail what happens to her son. So if that's triggering, probably don't read this. But anyways, she kind of visits the house where her son was kidnapped and taken to and then murdered. And so she just stays at this house all the time because she's grieving and she's trying to deal with this. And then it ends up going on the market and she ends up purchasing this house to see if maybe her son's ghost is still haunting the premises because he died here. And so I love the premise. Like, the premise is amazing. And I was invested in that aspect of the book, but I don't know, the writing style just wasn't really for me. And I just had a hard time connecting to our main character for whatever reason. And I don't know, it was okay. Like, maybe I would give it a 3 star instead of a 2. There is one scene in particular that was a pretty gnarly kill scene. But yeah, otherwise I don't know. I just couldn't connect to this one. And I know it's very vague. I'm sorry I can't give you any like definitive reason why I didn't like this book, but for whatever reason, the writing style just wasn't for me, and I just couldn't connect to it. And that's all I have to say about it, really. Okay, so I also did a reading vlog of Rachel Harrison's new book called So Thirsty. This is a vampire tale, And I decided to wait until February to do this vlog, even though it came out like a couple of months ago, because it talked about putting Christmas decorations away and looking at sad Christmas trees, and the winter was set in. And so it definitely gave the vibes of being just after Christmas. And so that's why I was like, oh, well, I should do this in January. It'll be perfect. Because it's not going to be about Christmas because Christmas is over, but it's still going to have those snowy vibes. So I decided to wait on this one. And unfortunately, this one didn't work for me either. So I would probably give this a 3-star. It was just kind of meh. It's a very, very typical vampire tale, you know? So this woman and her friend, they go away on this girls' trip, and they go to this fun party that ends badly and ends up turning these women into vampires. And then the whole rest of the book, they're trying to deal with the fact that they are no longer human. But I don't know, it was just very typical, very like I've seen that, been there, done that. And it almost seemed like it was trying to be like Twilight, but maybe like a parody, and very much more adult than Twilight, because there is an orgy in this book. So be aware of that if that's not something you want to read about. So I don't know. I didn't like these characters. I thought they were annoying, and our main character made a lot of bad decisions. And the coven that was part of this book was very flat and not fleshed out. Like, I don't know who these people are, other than they're the vampires, you know, that follow them around. But I don't know anything about these people. I don't know much about their personalities. I don't even remember their names except for the main guy and the love interest. So yeah, this wasn't as fantastic as I was hoping. I was hoping to get Such Sharp Teeth, but with vampires instead of werewolves, and that's not what I got. It was just, I don't know, kind of blah, to be honest. The vampire lore in this was also all over the place. It was inconsistent, and this whole entire story felt very repetitive and predictable. So yeah, I just wasn't a huge fan of this one, but Rachel Harrison does have a good writing style, because her books are always compulsively readable. I just binge them and go through them so quickly, even if I'm not 100% invested in the story. And I never felt like I wanted to DNF this, which is saying something. So it does have that going for it. But yeah, this is not my favorite of this author. Her next book coming out this year is a haunted house book, and I absolutely adore haunted house books. So I'm really, really, really hoping that that one works better for me, because I didn't like this one. I didn't like Black Sheep. So her last 2 books have been disappointments for me. So I'm really hoping this next one will be better. But fortunately, I did read a vampire book this month that did work for me. And that's The Gathering by C.J. Tudor. So this is also a snowy vampire book, and I thought it was far superior to So Thirsty. I thought it was very intriguing and interesting and unique, and a different take on a vampire tale, because it reads more like a detective story or like a police procedural. And so this is written where the vampires, you know, people know about the vampires, that they're not like these creatures that slink off into the woods. People know about them, but they're not necessarily part of society. They're kind of like, okay, we know vampires exist, you know, stick with your kind, we'll stick with our kind type of thing. But then in this small town in Alaska, one kid ends up being murdered, and then 20 years later, another kid ends up being murdered, and it seems to be the vampires who have done it. And so the people living in the town, they want to orchestrate what's called a cull, which is where they have lawful rights to just go and kill and massacre the vampires, get rid of them, for the sake of the safety of their children and of the townspeople. But in order to authorize this cull, they have to have the police get involved and let them know definitively that this was a vampire attack. So pretty interesting, you know, they don't consider vampires humans. They think they're other, they're just creatures. And, you know, just like any predator infestation, if it's going to wipe out a certain subspecies, then they're allowed to go in and kill them. And that's how they essentially feel about the vampires. And I love it because you get both perspectives. So you get to see the, I guess, racism, for lack of a better word, of the townspeople against the vampires. But then you also get to see the resentment from the vampires towards the humans, that they're not able to partake in human society and they have to live out in the woods and by themselves. And, you know, there was just a lot of interesting things to mull over in this book. And I really loved the main character. I really connected to her a lot. I thought she was a fantastic character, and I really enjoyed her. So yeah, I thought this was really good. I wouldn't quite put it 5 stars. It did start to drag a little bit by the end. I kind of just wanted to get there. But I'd probably give this 4.5 stars because I really enjoyed it and I thought it was really fun and unique and very snowy and all of that. So in my Book of the Month Club box, I got A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, and I figured it was snowy, so I should actually read it in the month that I got it, which I don't usually do. So this is about a woman who goes to a remote cabin to meet her new fiance's family, and they're very rich and well-to-do and kind of snooty when it comes to people marrying into their family, and they want to make sure she's good enough to marry into their family. So she travels there with her fiance, but one night she can't sleep or something. There's one cabin on the premise that has been abandoned and nobody uses it, and she thought it was because that's where the dad passed away by falling off the roof. But it sounds like that wasn't the case, so now she's really curious as to why this cabin has remained locked and people don't go in there anymore. So out of sheer curiosity, she goes into the cabin and she stumbles upon something that she shouldn't have. I think the premise does tell you what she discovers, but I'm not going to tell you what it is in case you don't want to know and you just want to discover it for yourself. But yeah, so she makes this secret discovery and it kind of sends her in a tailspin, and now she has to figure out this mystery. So I really enjoyed this one off and on. That's going to sound kind of weird, but when I first started reading it, it was pretty slow going. It was a little bit of a slow burn, and I almost considered DNFing it. But then when she made that discovery, I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And I kind of got invested, and it got faster paced, and I was really invested in the mystery. But then as time went on, I kind of got a little less invested. It was just the same thing over and over again, and her fiance Connor just happens to conveniently disappear anytime she needs to talk with her family alone. He's just there, and then, oh, I'm gonna go do something else and leave you with my cousin or leave you with my aunt or whatever, so she can conveniently talk to them about what she found and try to get questions or ask questions and get answers and stuff. But I don't know, and it was kind of okay, move on. So then I was starting to be less invested again. And then all of a sudden I'd become reinvested again for whatever reason, because it was fast paced and, and it's like one of those books where you think it's predictable, but you're like, this can't be the only thing. There has to be more to it. So you're just waiting for the next twist, And so, and it did deliver, it did have some twists. And so that's why I say I kind of like this one off and on. But at the end of the day, I would give this 4 stars because I really did enjoy it and I thought it was fun and it was snowy. So I would definitely give this a try if it sounds at all interesting to you. And this kind of has that amnesia trope that normally drives me bonkers, where they can't remember something about their childhood, but then lo and behold, right when they need to know the answers, they start to remember, And sometimes that can really bother me. I just think it's too convenient, and it's like something I've seen done over and over and over again. And so this does have that trope, but for whatever reason, it didn't bother me this time. I don't know why. Normally it would, but I don't know. This time it didn't. So take that for what you will. And then I read a couple of YA books. So the first one was Snowdrowned by Jennifer Lyle. And this one is classified as horror, but just so you know exactly what genre you're getting into, I'd say this is cosmic horror or maybe even dark fantasy. So that's not my favorite subgenre of horror, I'll be honest. And so when I saw this gothic house and stuff and there was a mystery, I was hoping it was going to be more gothic and a little bit more mysterious. But I mean, it is kind of mysterious, but not in the way that I was expecting. So I just want you to go into this with the right expectations if you want to check it out. But there's essentially this girl who lives on this island that nobody else goes to because it's kind of a religious cult type of thing where the Lord told somebody 100 years ago or whatever to sail across the ocean, and they discovered this island and they settled there, and so that's where she lives. And the people that settled up in the mountains that are the rich people, they're part of the church and part of that group, and then the people in the valley on this little island where she lives are like everybody else, And so she's not invited to the club because she doesn't want to be part of this church, and so she doesn't know anything about it. But it's YA, so she meets this boy and she gets embroiled in some kind of religious, culty ritual things. So it was interesting, and I did keep reading because I wanted to know the mystery. I didn't feel like I wanted to DNF it. So that was good, but when I ruminate on it, when I was finished with the book, it just wasn't my favorite. It was okay. So I would probably give this 3, maybe 3.5 stars if I'm being generous. But yeah, I liked it, but it's not like a new favorite by any means. And then I did a YA thriller called Don't Let in the Cold by Keely Perick. And I ended up DNFing this one halfway through. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is about a girl who goes to this remote cabin to spend some time with her stepsister because her mom just barely married this man and they're going out for their honeymoon. And so they're like, well, you guys stay at this cabin together while we go on our honeymoon. You can get to know each other, you can get acquainted because now you're going to be sisters. And I think this is a great plan. And our main character is leery about being out in the woods by ourselves, but the mom thinks it's actually safer to be out in the woods because there's no people around. And this new stepsister, she loves nature and she knows what she's doing, and so they don't see any problems with that. But as it goes with thriller books, something's going to happen while the parents are gone. So they do, and I thought this was going to be more of a home invasion story where they're at this cabin and people try to break in, and I thought it was going to be that kind of a story. And at first it was very atmospheric. She is good at writing atmosphere. But about a third of the way in, this turns into a survival story where they're out in the snow trying to survive in the cold. And that just isn't what I wanted from this book. That's not really what I signed up for. And it got very boring. And I hated our main character. I thought she was annoying and made bad decisions and acted younger than 17, if I'm being honest. And this book is very, very predictable. But I recognize that this is YA, and I don't necessarily take points away for predictability in YA books because it's meant for kids, it's not meant for adults. And so, I don't mark it down for that, but I just want to let you know that it is predictable. So what you think is happening is what's happening. So I don't know. I DNF'd. I did read the last 2 chapters just to make sure what I thought happened, and it did play out exactly like I thought it was going to. So yeah, I just thought this got ridiculous at times and boring, and it just wasn't for me. I just didn't end up liking this one. So I DNF'd halfway through. Okay, so my book club pick for my in-person book club, they chose The Echo of Old Books. And this isn't at all what I thought it was. I thought this was more of a fantasy book, but it's actually a romance with some magical realism. So go in with the right expectations. So this is technically historical fiction because the romance takes place during World War II. So it's all happening in 1941. But then you also get a modern point of view, which is not modern to us because it's in the 80s. So this woman in the 80s, she kind of has this special ability where she picks up a book and she can kind of read an echo from this book. So basically, the person who owned that book, their emotions are imprinted onto that book, and she can feel that when she picks up the book. And so she discovers these 2 books that have really strong emotions attached to it, like love and pain and betrayal and all of these things, enough to where it almost knocks her over, wow, that's an intense echo on this book. But these 2 books, she's like, I don't know where they came from. There's no publishing house, there's no author name, there's no copyright, there's nothing to indicate where this book came from. And so she tries to figure out where these books come from, and she starts to read, and she gets invested in this book, and she starts to realize that she thinks that this is not a fiction book. She thinks this is more like a diary, And so she's trying to track down these 2 star-crossed lovers that had something happen to them that drove them apart for 40 years. And she's trying to track them down and see what happened and why, and maybe they can reconnect. So in the beginning, I wasn't sure I was going to like this book because I felt that the two main characters in the past were pretty unlikable. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to see a love story between these two. But eventually I did get invested in their story and I ended up liking it. And I enjoyed the past chapters way more than the modern ones. I kind of skimmed through those ones, if I'm being honest, because I just wasn't that invested in the modern ones. But I mean, it needed to be included for the sake of the story, though. And in the modern times, she kind of gets her own little romance, which was kind of fun. But yeah, I ended up enjoying this one, and I would probably give it 4 stars. Like, it's not like a new favorite that I absolutely loved, but I was invested and I was interested the entire time. So I would call it a win. Okay, so that's all the books that I read in the month of January. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favorite book that you read in January was, or if you've read any of the books that I read and whether you liked them or didn't like them. And I post every Friday, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!